welcome you to our University Press Directors Roundtable session. Following up the great discussions at AUP annual conference the other week, we thought it would be good to carry on these discussions with some of our university presses on how they've been finding the last couple of months of unprecedented change in their communities. We'd like to welcome from New York University Press, Ellen Chodosh, who is their director, and Mary Beth Jarrad, who is their sales and marketing director. We'd also like to introduce from Manchester University Press, Simon Ross, who is their chief executive, and John Normansell, who is their production and operations director. And from Hawaii University Press, we'd like to introduce Joel Cospoon, who is their interim director and publisher. And I apologise for any mispronunciation of surnames there. Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you also to everybody who's registered for this webinar and is listening in today. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. The roundtable discussion will be about 45 minutes, with time towards the end to answer questions from the audience. Please feel free to submit your question through the Q&A functionality during the event. If you have a question for a particular press or individual, please include this information in your questions. At the end, depending on time, we'll then read these questions out and give panelists the chance to answer them. Anything we don't cover, obviously, we'll try and follow up offline afterwards as well. So moving straight on to the questions, I'd like to start with our first question, which is, have you seen particular trends for certain content from your publishing list during the past 3 or 4 months? Have you seen a shift in readership or increased engagement from particular channels? Ellen, would you like to start with that one?
Yes, certainly. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to participate in this webinar. It's really nice to have the opportunity to talk to everybody. I would say that the trend that we see before everything, well, at NYU Press, we were not having a particularly great year up until March. We were running behind. It looked like when Amazon stopped placing orders in February, you know, that we took really a pretty serious hit there. The books that were selling in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic were sort of, I would say, I would consider pandemic adjacent. We don't really have the kind of list that deals with public health issues or the kind of historical books that, you know, would give you a context for what had happened in the past. But we started to see interest in the books that we had on inequality in healthcare and the way poverty was affecting certain communities in terms of their health. Then there was the screeching halt in April. And since the killing of George Floyd and the protests around Black Lives Matters, everything that's selling for us is related to race and racism in one form or another. And in police reform, we happen to have a very strong list in criminology that has a lot of books about the impact of aggressive police tactics on communities and on young Black and Latino men. And there's been a tremendous uptick in interest in those. And also in our books more generally about social protest and social movements in general. And that has carried on through June, and it just remains to be seen whether that level of interest carries on through the end of the summer.
Interesting, thank you, Ellen. And Simon, how have you found it? What sort of patterns have you seen?
So some similarities there with New York University Press. We were actually having a good year before all this hit, and consequently not such a good year. But it's been similarly, we had some backlist titles that had a resurgence. Many around sort of medical history related titles, for example, previous pandemics, the Spanish flu in particular, where had an uplift there. And then subsequently, definitely books around race and particularly colonialism for us have picked up. And we actually have some strong front list titles around there that are gaining really strong dues, which is nice to see. In terms of engagement, I mean, a lot of this is a story more about the channels and the content, because of course libraries effectively closed. The institutional market was closed down, and at the same time we saw the high street, the trade market also hit with bookshops closing and so on. So we kind of had a double whammy there, but we very quickly pivoted to focusing on digital and accelerated some activities around our digital plans. So what we did benefit from was running a number of free trials to our content, to our existing customers, and trying to get new customers or potential customers to engage with our content with free trials as well. And I think many university presses did that. And in addition to that, some of the key aggregators also participated in that. So that's provided a huge boost in terms of uptake and engagement with our content. So the usage has been massively up. The uptakes on the free trials has been very popular and actually very welcome. So that's increased not only engagement, but I think the tone, or if you like, of the engagement, that we are all in this together. So that's been much appreciated. And on the trade side, our trade books typically rely on a lot of physical activities and events, author-led events and so on, and that of course didn't happen. And we were a bit down on this. We thought that that none of our trade books were going to do very well, and in fact we pushed many of them back to September, which I think many other publishers did too. So we're going to see a whole glut of publishing in September. But for those titles that we didn't push back, that was too late, or we thought we would go ahead with, they've done surprisingly well. That could be a combination of factors. For example, it could be that there's not that much publishing going on because everyone's pushed back their key titles. But actually what we did do was to creatively host events online to promote these books. And we came up with this concept of armchair events where we would get the author and some other commentators potentially to talk about topics around the books we were publishing. And this has been very successful and has driven sales in a way that we didn't anticipate. So selling what we call our academic trade titles has filled the gap which has been created by the lack of institutional sales, particularly on the print side. And while there has been some institutional digital sales of our collections, there's been hardly any print at all. So it was an unpredictable response to our list and engagement, but not all negative. And lots of positives in what we've seen and we continue to see.
That's very interesting. And Joel, how have you found it?
Right as I unmute, a garbage truck is driving by, so there's a little bit of noise out there. Perfect timing. So for us, we experienced, something very similar with, having a pretty decent year going into the pandemic. And then March was actually somewhat of an even month for us, which was surprising. And then April just really went down substantially, especially when Amazon started prioritizing household goods and PPE and so forth. And then May and June kind of bounced back up for us. But I think in the beginning, I think one of the trends that we did see was, a lot of courses transitioning to online. They were looking for digital versions of their textbooks or workbooks, just looking to transition. Some of their students were from China and were stuck in China and couldn't get back home or couldn't get back to the university to get their textbooks. And so we ended up, coming up with creative ways to get get our content out there. We luckily have an online workbook for our Korean language textbook series, so we were able to transition some people to that, which worked out well. And then on the kind of academic monograph side, library sales had already been, kind of dipping over the years and kind of going down. So it wasn't a surprise that it went down even further through the pandemic. But you know, academics themselves tend to purchase our monographs, especially at you know, conferences. And with conferences being canceled, we came up with creative ways to have online sales that were targeted to the folks that would have attended those conferences. So the Asian Studies Conference was supposed to be in March, and that was canceled. So we had an online Asian Studies kind of sale on our website, and that direct-to-consumer marketing really helped out. And then on the, you know, we have a really good regional list because Hawaii is kind of insular, and we have a captive audience. So we did some local marketing and sales since the bookstores here were closed. You know, county by county, they decided whether or not bookstores would be considered essential businesses, and in Honolulu, they were not. So we were able to kind of fulfill the needs of readers in Hawaii by filling direct-to-consumer orders. And that seemed to work really well. It remains to be seen what happens over the next couple of months. It'll be interesting for me to see how the academic, the classroom use goes, if people will be able to transition to using digital, or if we're still getting orders from bookstores, which is, you know, I mean, it's good news. It's also a little surprising considering everything that's going on. But yeah, I'm hopefully optimistic of the next couple months to see how the return to classes goes.
Great, thanks very much, Joel. Yeah, it's really interesting. So moving on to sort of the next sort of thing, have you seen sort of changes in the demand for open access titles? Obviously, some of you just mentioned there that you made content sort of available for free during this period. So have you seen like a change in demand, a big demand for sort of open access titles or academic trade publications? Obviously, some of those crossover sort of medical titles you were talking about, that or an interest in backlist titles. So Simon, did you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mark. Well, as you said, many of us were running free trials, so it's been noticeable that there's been rather little conversation about open access. Most of the conversation has been around the response to changes in policies in for example, in the UK through the UKRI, and indeed in the US, I think from the OSTP, there was responses to proposed changes in open access policy, particularly towards book publishing, that I think we were all engaged with and responded to. Other than that, we had already had in train or already published a number of open access books because of the REF cycle in the UK, which is to do with how universities are rated and indeed funded by the quality of their research output. So we had already done a deal with our own home university to publish every Manchester-based academic that we were publishing open access. So we already had a considerable amount going on, but then of course the REF process was postponed, so it was kind of well, it wasn't a waste, because I think the usage of those titles and the profile of those titles is going to be beneficial to the authors and the work in the long run anyway. I mentioned that the trade titles that we'd been building up over this last year had done much better than we had anticipated. But other than that, they're the two features that I would mention.
Thank you, Simon. And Ellen, how regarding those sort of demand for those sort of titles from yourself?
Well, we went to great lengths to help students and faculty get to the books that they were separated from when they suddenly had to flee their physical spaces. But we didn't actually make anything open. We extended the access through the platforms that had already purchased our books. And, that was welcome, and it seemed to do the trick. So we published some open access titles, but really none of them were relevant to this particular period. So I didn't expect to see any uptick in sales. What was interesting was that, after the whole outcry about the National Emergency Library, I did sort of check back on it from time to time because we left most of our books in there. We pulled a few, but by and large, our backlist was there. And there was really no change in downloads, which I found kind of surprising because, of course, the argument was let's make everything free because nobody could get books. So that turned out to be kind of a big nothing, to be honest. The greatest interest on our list is for what we consider to be these crossover titles, these academic trade books. It's a sweet spot for us. We publish most of our books as dual editions. They're on interesting subjects, but they tend to be written at a somewhat higher level. And that was not daunting to the readership at all. I mean, that is where we have seen, it's rich, important work, and people recognized it. So.
Absolutely. And Joel, how have you found sort of demand in sort of open access titles or crossover titles that you do?
Yeah, so for open access, I mean, we've done several open access initiatives with Mellon Foundation, some individual open access initiatives here at UH, and then most recently the Sustainable History Monograph pilot. And we're still waiting to get a aggregated platform to look at all of the metrics for all of the different locations where that open access content is hosted. So I don't really have any information as far as the change in demand. We didn't make any of our digital holdings OA for the pandemic. We, like I mentioned before, we did kind of specific targeted assistance with requests when people contacted us. So we would help out specific instructors who were looking for help. We also ran some discounts on our ebooks online just because we knew that people were doing more reading and more online reading. So we did run some discounts, which seemed to we'll see how it turns out because it's still running. And as far as the academic trade goes, I think for us, since our list is kind of divided between kind of the Asian studies and then the Hawaii Pacific studies, the academic trade side, I really, we have more of our Hawaii list is there. And I mentioned that before. And we did see kind of an uptick on a few titles. We had some trade titles that came out that are more academic in nature that came out in May and June. And we did see quite a nice uptick in sales during that period of time, mostly to local customers here in Hawaii.
So Joel, just on that, we were talking about the sales and discount. Was that something you ran off your own website, or did you make that through sort of normal retailers?
So on the ebooks, it was run through, we don't sell ebooks on our website. So yet, but it's something that we're looking to do. So we ran it through, third-party folks, like eBrary, JSTOR, and those guys.
Okay.
Can I just add something to that? I think what we've noticed is that there's a lot more opportunity to sell direct to consumers, and it seems that consumers are demanding this because when they can't get the books through the regular channels, they really do make an effort to get them. So we've been beefing up our ability to sell direct, either digital or print. But one thing I thought I might mention is that we found selling not even crossover titles or trade titles through the strangest channels, particularly in the US. So we had some titles. One was about nuns in a secular society. Our top 10 sellers in the in that the retail trade was that book, and they were going through Walmart and Target, which we thought was amazing. You know, I'm glad that our books are that accessible. But amazing how you'll find that, you know, that when there's demand, that they, you know, that all our distributor, in this case Ingram, were able to supply them to where the demand was. I assume they were related to a course, but, you know, I mean, we sold 90 copies. I mean, they must be.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that's yeah, that is really, really interesting. And actually, it sort of leads on a bit to the sort of next question, really, which is kind of obviously, you know, would you say that qualified, verified, sort of peer-reviewed quality content is increasingly important in today's environment? Obviously, there's a lot of talk about fake news, etc. And, you know, I think, you know, people are seeking out kind of different channels to get this, you know, really good quality verified content that obviously you all provide. So I wondered if you could just give some thoughts on that. Joel, did you want to start with that one?
Sure. Well, I think the value of peer review, I mean, it really, the whole process, not just to the end consumer of content, but the whole peer review process really kind of improves the quality of scholarship and, you know, vets it. And, you know, one of the things that I saw and read in the news was this whole hydroxychloroquine issue, where there was an article that came out where the data that was used wasn't really reviewed before the article was pre-published. And, you know, had it gone through, and this was through a large commercial journals publisher, who I'm not going to say that in general large commercial journals publishers are not up to snuff, but I think that this one was not particularly keen on really, you know, fair and balanced peer review efforts. And so, you know, content went out, and it caused problems around the world because people believed that, you know, what was published was true, when in fact the data was not necessarily valid. So, I mean, especially in the era of fake news and, you know, what's going on today, it's a huge value to have good quality peer review in the publishing process.
Absolutely. Ellen, would you like to give some thoughts on that as well? Oh, sorry, I think you're on mute at the moment, Ellen.
Well, I mean, honestly, the value of peer review is not in question at all, but I know it's sacrilegious to say it to this particular group, but the average person doesn't know or care about peer review. I mean, this is very inside baseball for us. They get the benefit of it, but they don't really understand what the process is or even what the point of it is. But I think what the public responds to, particularly in a time like this, and it's exactly what we saw after 9/11, is that the kinds of books that we publish in university presses fill out the story in a way that you have to have if you want to totally understand what it is that's going on in the current moment. Because there are the books by journalists that are very like on the ground, they're telling you what's happening today. There are these passionate, wonderfully written books of, I would call, cultural criticism, like a book like Ta-Nehisi Coates, for example, where they have a very strong point of view and they grab you. But if you want to understand the context, how did we get here and what are we going to do about it? You need to go to a book that's based on deep research and theory, years of study that our authors are giving to the public to help round out the picture. So there's really no doubt, but it's an invisible benefit that we're giving to the public. It's visible to us, but it's invisible to them.
Yes, that's very true. And Simon, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just a few comments. I kind of agree and disagree with Ellen on this, partly because I think you haven't distinguished between the different types of product you're selling. So if you're talking
That's
about
true, yes.
a trade-oriented title, then I think there's an element of truth in what you say. But of course, a lot of our readers are our authors, so they have multiple personas, if you like, in our world. You know, they're contributors to our books, they're reviewers of our books, they're purchasers of our books, they're users of our books on their courses and so on. So I think there is a very deep understanding of the value of peer review for the core of our audience. And otherwise, I think even if readers don't, the general reader, the educated general reader, don't fully understand what peer review is and how it should be conducted and who the peer reviewers are, because the quality of the peer review is the important issue here. I think that they see university presses as trusted sources of information, which is, I think, is what you've just said. And so I think that's where the value lies. And this is why we're very conscious of protecting our reputation, or more truthfully, our university's reputation, because we are really an extension of the university and their mission and their purpose. But I do think there is something to add further to that. So in what I think we've been able to do effectively with our customers and potential customers is use this position of trust in order to engage more fully with our potential customers, our users, our readers, and so on. And I think this has been, you can see this in how we've been able to successfully go online with our events and activities and so on, and engage a wider participation in what we do. So we've seen many hundreds sign up for our online webinars, armchair events, and so on. Not all academics at all, and had some really positive comments about that. And I think that's where we see the value of university presses in this role as a trusted source of information. So when we curate events, when we host events, people just they see them differently from other commercial publishers. They don't see them as being motivated by shifting books. Of course, we want to shift books. We want to sell books. But more importantly, it's about the dissemination of, you know, the contribution of the issue, the argument, and so on. And I think people are much more willing to engage with us as publishers than perhaps with other commercial publishers.
Interesting. That's great, Simon. Actually, so leading on to that, obviously, you've mentioned already some of the ways that kind of you're changing or how you're sort of getting and interacting with your customers. So I was just wondering, you know, obviously, if you could just expand a bit on how you've sort of changed communicating with your different customer bases, and how you've been doing that. Mary Beth, did you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I think that the first thing is that it was very reassuring how many people reached out to us to say that they couldn't have access to their course materials. I think that we talk all the time, at least at NYU, but also across university press publishing and college publishing, about how, you know, course use is dying and students aren't using books. And the fact that so many professors and students reached out to us to ask for access. I mean, I found that very reassuring and gave me a glimmer of hope for the future. So I think that for us, it was really just being responsive to our community and making sure that we were available to them. A lot of our print customers reached out to us to see what kind of accommodations we could make, but it was mostly our digital partners who were very creative and anticipated the shifting needs of the market and came to us for partnering. And, you know, that's great to know that we are seen as that kind of a partner to them.
That's great. That's very positive. And John, how have you sort of found the sort of communication with customer base and your tools you've been using at Manchester?
Thanks, Mark. In terms of the communication with customers, I think Simon mentioned earlier that we've had a lot more direct contact through marketing and online events, and we found that we sold more books directly through their website as other channels have closed down. In terms of how Biblio has helped us with this process, it's really helped us more in terms of managing our data and making sure that our data gets out there to the right channels. So, you know, we were already very well set up on Biblio. So we were already feeding out Onyx data to our UK customers, for example. But since the lockdown, we've also been looking to expand those Onyx feeds so that we are able to deliver the data directly to our global channels as well. So we're setting up an Onyx feed directly to our US distributor, which should be online in a few weeks, and we're also setting up an Onyx feed to our Australian distributor, which is coming online by the beginning of August as well. So from that point of view, it's helped us to sort of get our data out to the market. We've also found that we can set up additional formats or pricing models within Biblio to feed out our ebook pricing to different channels as well. So we're in the process of just revising the way we've set up our formats within Biblio to sort of capture that pricing, the different pricing models in more detail. And we've also found it quite useful now that we can capture all the open access metadata within Biblio, because I'm sure that's really going to be more and more useful going forwards.
John, just on that quickly, did you change any of the metadata, you know, go through any of your descriptive copy of any of your sort of title lists and update it to then send it out to the customer base to maybe tweak a description to make it more relevant for the current thing? And that answer goes for any of the other UPs as well.
I mean, we do that all the time. We tweak the descriptions as the book goes through the process. It can take 9 months or more for a book to pass through the process before it's published. So during that time, the metadata will get tweaked at various points. We haven't done anything particularly different because of the recent events, but yeah, but it's something we look at all the time. We certainly looked at things like our pricing metadata, our discount metadata. We're thinking about our ebook pricing, whether that's right at the moment, or whether we should revise that. Maybe we could, you know, sort of make more of our digital sales if our EPUBs were priced to sell into a different market.
Interesting, thank you, John. And then Joe, you've obviously mentioned some of the ways you sort of your customers or both been communicating with you. Would you like to say anything additional to?
Yeah, I don't really have anything additional to say about that, but I have something to add to Rod's question about you know, sending out metadata. One of the things that we have done recently is we've started using supporting resources in Biblio and feeding those out to our website. So we just did a revision to our website that went live. It was a small tweak, like a 2.1 version of our website, and it's taking supporting resources, so PDFs, URLs, and things like that, and feeding those to the website that are associated with the products there. So we have added that functionality to our metadata so that it's feeding out more info for our customers.
Oh, that's great.
We tweak our catalog copy all the time just to make it relevant. I mean, just because we have such a deep backlist, and as Ellen was saying, our backlist becomes relevant at different points, you know, in the culture and the time. And so if you can add a few keywords to your catalog copy, it helps it come up in search more quickly, and then you can. So.
Yes, absolutely. So it's changing the subject a bit now. So looking at sort of print purchasing decisions, sort of how much has that changed in the sort of 3 to 4 months? So essentially sort of thinking about sort of switching more titles maybe from litho to POD, or from ultra short run to pure, or POD, or yeah, one copy at a time. How have you, have you been doing much of that? I think John, you mentioned that you've switched your titles to sort of POD or more to POD.
Yeah, we've changed our print purchasing fairly dramatically since March, and we changed it very quickly. So previously we were doing a short initial run of our monographs, which represents about 90% of our list. And then further down the line, several years later, we were switching the books over to print on demand. But we realized that we couldn't rely on the channels anymore, that shipping copies to our second market in the US was becoming quite difficult. So we made a decision to switch virtually all of our front list to a print on demand model. I think that has a number of advantages for us. One is we don't have to make a decision about the print run when we send the book to press. And the market's very unpredictable at the moment. We don't know how it's going to go. So it means we don't have to put books into the warehouse we don't know whether we can sell. We can actually publish in several markets at once simultaneously. So, set up with print on demand, we can publish simultaneously in the UK and the US by going through our print on demand supplier and not have to wait for the shipping time. And it also allows us to sort of sell books direct to the market through our distributor and through Amazon and other routes, really. When other channels have been closed, such as the traditional sort of, university library purchases and the university bookshops. So it was a sudden but necessary decision. I think we would have got to this point anyway in a year, maybe 2 years' time. Is the way the market's been going, but we changed very rapidly and very suddenly a few months back.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere the other day that it's accelerated that change or that switch over much faster than
absolutely
before, sort of thing. So Joel or Mary Beth, have you found similar? Have you changed your print purchasing decisions?
At the beginning, Ellen and I felt we were being very brave and very forward looking. We cut a lot of our print runs of our forthcoming paperbacks. And, for the most part, we were right, but a few times we were horrifically wrong and we had to reprint before the book even published. So, that's great that we were so wrong, but we also were just kind of bewildered as to what was going on in the market. Like, we thought that print, was in hiatus, and the fact that it would come back so quickly, and so sporadically, we were taken aback. But we've been very aggressive about print on demand for a really long time, which has turned out to be great, especially, for titles that, that are deeper backlists that you didn't know were going to pop back on. In June, we saw a huge surge of demand from bookshop.org. I don't know if everybody saw that. And, it was across the range. So a few books we had plenty of stock, and a few were deep backlist titles. We sold 800 copies of an 11-year-old title just in June through Bookshop. So, for that type of title, print on demand is absolutely necessary. So we were really glad that we made that kind of effort early on.
That's amazing. So the reaction time is much quicker by using that method. And Joel, have you done similar?
Yeah, we've been pretty aggressive on print on demand for, several years now. Our fulfillment center has a, printer on site where they do short run replenishment and so forth. So a lot of our titles are already set up there. But one of the things that we did is, a couple of our new paperbacks, since Amazon had changed their purchasing to, kind of focus on household goods and so forth, a couple of our new titles weren't available on Amazon yet. So we quickly put them into the Kindle Enterprise Publishing program to have print on demand with Amazon, to have those paperbacks available, and that kind of helped hold us over until regular purchase orders started happening again.
Interesting. Obviously, you mentioned there, obviously there's been there have been challenges in the supply chain and the distribution during this period. And obviously, you just talked about some of the ways you managed to adjust to that. Did you also find you're using your sort of existing online platforms, your own or otherwise, to reach more customers directly? I think, the Manchester Hive platform and your other platforms, the other university presses. Could you speak a bit about that, please?
Me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, the Hive, through the Hive, the publishing platform, the Hive and the Open Hive, our books are sort of put together in collections and sold on a subscription basis. And a lot of those were obviously made sort of freely available. I think up until the end of June. So that continued. And one of the interesting new sort of approaches we had was to also publish our textbooks on the Hive. So now we've had a huge program to digitize most of our major textbooks, textbook program, and those have now been also been made available, you know, through the Hive as well.
Interestingly, and then Ellen or Mary Beth, up from New York University Press perspective, your channels.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things that we've been focused on over the last 2 years is really building up our in-house lists of contacts by subject and making sure they're all coded. And that work actually paid off. And so when everything shut down, we already had a very robust network of contacts. And so feel like everybody really responded to that. And there were then some new opportunities to add names to our contact list through, you know, desk and exam copies and Instagram and Twitter. And it felt like people had become very used to these traditional modes of contact. And then when all of those were were demolished, they realized that there was a safety net already in place, and they made really good use of that.
And Joel, have you seen more from those sort of channels as well?
Well, yeah, on the supply chain side, I mean, we had some issues with printing that we had to, you know, a couple of our printers were in areas where they weren't considered essential businesses, and they had, you know, minimal staffs, and, you know, there were changes at the very end with one book where we made requests to the printer and we just weren't hearing back from them because they were just slammed because they were one of the few that was getting hammered with orders. And so we had to make some quick decisions at the very end to, you know, move ahead with a print job versus making the change. And then, yeah, I think that on the kind of review copy side, you know, typically we have some reviewers who are kind of adamant about getting their print copies, and we really push for digital. And we did see a big kind of sea change there, where people were saying, hey, since the pandemic, I would really like to receive a digital copy, or we're changing our policy to have digital copies now. So we started sending out a lot more digital review copies, which helps the bottom line.
Absolutely. And do you think that's a sort of trend that will continue? Kind of, do you think people will then just adjust to that going forward as well, and continue to be happy to get it in that method?
I'll knock on wood and say, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about this a lot. I feel like this has given us an opportunity to rethink a lot of the things that we've always done, right? We've always printed galleys. We've always sold books at conferences. And now without that, I mean, what I hope is that we can use this time to rethink, you know, these things that we've always done, so that, you know, when things come back, because eventually they will, you know, we don't just fall back into doing the exact same things because we've always done it. So, and I feel like galleys is a really good outlier in that respect, just because, you know, we spend a lot of time and effort printing them and making them look beautiful and crafting the list. And if you can get more copies to more reviewers with really not a lot of downside, I feel like that's a real benefit to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So you see that there's the sort of review or change of processes will continue afterwards of something. It's an opportunity to review some of these processes. But yeah, that's a positive thing to yeah, like you said, it either accelerate a process change or sort of expand on that. It's like you said before, maybe there wasn't. Sorry, Simon, go on.
Yes, I was going to say we were unfortunately fortunate to have a dry run for COVID-19 in many ways with preparation for Brexit. So that put the sort of the cat among the pigeons, as it were, and gave us a big scare. So we had already planned to do distributed printing and looked at all sorts of ways of making sure that our business was not hampered by this, by supply chain issues, shipping stuff overseas and everything. So a lot of what we were doing were just as an acceleration. But I have to say that the one thing that we really did push through was the online verification and approval processes within our businesses, which we should have done years ago. And one of the reasons for not doing that, I have to say, is because the university would not accept certain types of electronic document signature and verification. And all of a sudden they relented and said, let's do it because we don't have any other options. So we were able to move very quickly to do that. And I think the amount of efficiencies that we've been able to identify in these approval and sign-off processes has been one of the key benefits of this lockdown. So we definitely won't be going back to a lot of that print paper, which we don't need anymore. We will not be going, well, we will be sticking with POD for the majority of our program. And then we will probably be doing many more online marketing and events than we used to. And I don't actually see conferences coming back anytime soon anyway. I think they will come back because I think there is something about the nature of conferences and physical events that it's very hard to reproduce. And there's just an element of serendipity, an opportunity that you just cannot get through a Zoom meeting, I'm afraid. You know, there's something about gathering of, you know, like-minded people or around a particular topic or issue that cannot be adequately recreated through an online experience. So we know that they're going to come back, but I think they will feature less as a part of our overall activities. And we've seen significant savings around that, which we kind of like to keep some of, because there's an expensive business flying around the world and drinking in expensive bars, as we all know.
Okay, Simon, let's not advocate for that to go away forever. Like, let's get real here.
I've spent the last 25 years of my life doing that, so I feel that I've done my share of drinking now.
You have not.
Anyway, it will come back, but not as it was before, I don't think.
Yeah, in a different shape or form, or with new bits added to it, or yeah. Okay, great. And then I'm conscious of the time, so we've got about 10 minutes left of the session. I just wanted to sort of give you the opportunity. I know it's probably a really difficult question to answer, but I just wondered if you could just focus in or talk to us a bit about sort of what publication or publications from your current catalogue, either frontlist or backlist, you would suggest people seek out and read at this time. Who would like to take that one first?
I'll take it. I highly recommend our book called Uncounted, which is a history of voter suppression in the United States. This could not be more timely in light of the upcoming election and all of the efforts around keeping people from voting. It's just a fantastic book. The author is fantastic, and that would be my pick.
Great, thank you, Ellen. Joel, what would you recommend?
Well, I'm going to recommend a title that's a new one for us. It's the Mo'olelo of Davida Malo. It's a translation of an old Hawaiian manuscript. It really speaks to kind of the Hawaiian culture and would give somebody a glimpse into the native Hawaiian culture and practices in Hawaii.
Oh, great. That sounds great. And Simon, what would you recommend from Manchester's catalogue?
well, as I'm going last, and if you'll forgive me, I'm going to mention two. The first is really because it was a real hit around our armchair events, promoting a discussion around the topic as an online webinar, and the author Alison Phipps was tremendous in giving basically a mini lecture that you could probably replay for students. But the book is called Me Not You, the problem with or the trouble with mainstream feminism, which is a critique of feminism in this Me Too era. And it's a very interesting book. We sold out the print run because of this, the way we promoted it, and we've reprinted it, and be very happy with that. It's a trade-oriented crossover book. The other one I'll mention because it's about our colonial past, which is very present in the all over the world now. But it's been an issue that we've been publishing around for a while. There was a big story about what's called the Windrush generation here, and how a number of people who were encouraged to come here from our colonies, past colonies, to work when people didn't want to do things like drive buses and so on. Their families were starting to be deported, or they were being deported because they didn't have proper ID around their ability to stay. But the book that's really done well for us is Bordering Britain, Law, Race and Empire, which is about a whole host of our institutions and how we're beholden to our colonial past. And that's done very well and will continue to do well. And is a fantastic book, which is being well reviewed and also selling very well. And we're just I think we're very fortunate to have these kind of titles that are not only highly topical, but also accessible by a general public as well. And so we're very happy about those. Sorry for mentioning two books.
Yeah. Just we are coming to a close. I do have one question from the audience, and then the other thing I just maybe as a parting shot for each of you as well is we've talked a lot so far about changes with external. Whether it be with customers and supply chain and things like that. Is there anything about, opportunities for internal processes and changes that you've found from remote working? I think a lot of people are university presses. From my experience over the years, tend to be less excited about changing some workflows and processes and meeting formats and all of that. And so I'm just wondering what the impact of working remotely has been, and is it an opportunity to whether it's printing out things or the way that people are updating data that you can carry on when you do go back to the normal way of working?
I mean, certainly at Manchester, we found that when we were in the office, we still had lots of form-based processes where people would hand over a book and fill in a paper form and hand it over. And we've certainly found that, moving to home working has, sort of forced us to move away from those old models, and it's been very useful. And so we have been working within Biblio. We've used the dashboards function in Biblio to set up those forms as online forms. And I would say actually that because most of our office business is managed through Biblio, and most of our publishing processes and our data distribution and so on, when we moved to work from home, we did find that we could carry on with business as usual fairly easily because we were able to access all our content and our data and our schedules and our forms, in the cloud. So in fact, it was a very easy move when we all suddenly had to move to work from home at the end of March, and we didn't find that was a challenge in terms of just communicating our processes and data.
Great, thanks.
I feel like this time has has professionalized NYU in some ways, in exactly the way that John's talking about. Like, there was this huge reliance in walking around paper and forms and asking people person by person if they were available for a meeting. Like, so it's great that all of that has moved online, and I feel like that portion is really streamlined. The worst part are the things that aren't on paper. So Ellen and I had a conversation, just the two of us, about whether or not we're going to move a book into paperback. And we talked about it, but then we didn't, it wasn't immediate. It wasn't happening right this second. So we didn't include 1,000 other people in that conversation, only to realize that that was a critical piece of information that 3 other people in the company needed. And that's the sort of thing that I think is really tough to replicate, both in a system and when you're not in the office. And so that's something that we need to be more aware of, I think.
Yeah, we've had kind of a similar, situation with working online, and I have to say that having Biblio in the cloud is really helpful. The big challenges that I, and I know others at UH Press have had. Sorry, the dogs are barking out there.
Right.
The challenges that we've had is with the the VPN and getting into our office network and things like that. I mean, I had some computer issues over the last week or so, which had some big issues for me. And I have to say that having Biblio on the cloud was super helpful. One of the things that we've done with some of the kind of unnecessary meetings that we used to have, like these really long, drawn out kind of transmittal meetings, is we took it into Basecamp, which is a tool that we use at the press. And everybody just logged into Basecamp at the same time, and we had like this discussion of titles in there for the ones that didn't necessarily need a lot of back and forth on. So we just confirmed a bunch of points of metadata, updated Biblio simultaneously, and then had went on our day. And it took a little bit less time than a normal meeting, but I think that people were able to kind of check out and multitask during that period of time, as opposed to being sitting in a meeting where they weren't necessarily required to be there for the whole meeting. So yeah, we've definitely seen some changes, and I think that they'll probably stick over the long run.
It's interesting because we still have all of our standing meetings, and I would say that we have a few more meetings that we hadn't had before, but they're much less formal. Like the editorial group has a check-in every morning. It doesn't take very long. They just all meet up for 10 minutes just to say hello and see what's going on. And I think that new layer of communication has actually proved to be a good thing. The question is sort of how to spread it throughout the whole press without having formal all-staff meetings all the time, which aren't usually that much fun. But on a departmental level, it does seem like communication is actually improved by us being apart.
I would agree with that. I think Zoom has made meetings much more efficient and generally shorter. So we have a management meeting every week that somehow used to stretch over 2 hours. Now we struggle to fill an hour. So I think there's the level of efficiency that's been achieved. I also think the level of engagement from everyone in a meeting is more democratic, or at least, if someone is shy or reticent or whatever, it's easier for them to, I think, participate, and less easy for them to hide. It's also, so I think there are some things around, particularly around the Zoom style meetings that have helped, and I think that it's also easier to get everyone together to have meetings. I mean, in the university we've had meetings with over 300 people on Zoom, which is amazing. I mean, we have a heads meeting with 70 people. It actually runs really efficiently. And the last thing I'd like to mention is that everyone is much more courteous in a Zoom meeting than they are in the flesh.
Really?
Long may that last.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. We have one question that had come through, and it was for Joel, and it was just, and I think you mentioned a bit, but did Hawaii sell print or digital books on its website? And I think you were saying that you'd sold that through existing partners during the pandemic.
Yeah, so print was only on our website. We're looking to get digital added, and then any digital sales that we've been doing are through third parties. Yeah.
So the print, that's a good point. So the print, you did take orders on your own website, and then you fulfilled those, and then the digital side, you were sending them to the existing retailers.
Yeah.
Okay. They did ask for specifics on units and dollars sold to conference attendees, but I'm sure that's probably something you want to keep in your pocket.
Yeah, it's written down somewhere. I don't have it in my head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Great. Well, Mark, over to you. Oh, hang on. Sorry, we've got a few other things coming in here. Regarding print on demand, have you taken the decision for efficiency or cost reasons? Have you found the costs have been increased as a result of going POD, or do you sometimes do short runs? I think that's just a general one, but for any of those, maybe switch to POD. Is it obviously costing more per book, but is the overall profitability better or worse with going with POD?
So the unit price does go up. Obviously, the traditional printing method where you print hundreds of books, you get a lower unit price than you do for print on demand. But we've found that we've saved in different ways. So, for example, we've saved on shipping costs. Our distribution costs are lower. We pay a lower fee for distribution than we would if we were storing the traditional books in the warehouse. So we've saved in sort of roundabout ways. We've also potentially saved on having stock in the warehouse and having potentially to write off that stock if it doesn't sell. So whilst the direct costs have gone up, the overall costs hopefully will make it worthwhile.
Okay. I presume that's pretty much around the board. Has anyone got any sort of difference or?
Well, I can just kind of add that it's really taken the guesswork out of print runs, which is great. It's just because that's kind of the game in publishing is you try and guesstimate as best you can, and even now with our short runs, we still underestimate and overestimate, but I think over the long run, even though the unit costs are higher, we're saving and not having to remainder books, not having to pulp and run warehouse reduction sales as much. We still have inventory from many years ago in our warehouse that we're constantly trying to get rid of, and it hopefully over the long run that will go away.
Okay, that's good. And we have a question then for Simon, which was the armchair events. This is the online ones. Sell books as well as your in-person events, or was it a little less?
I think the experience has been more. It depends how many author events you have, of course, but yeah. If you're looking for bang per buck an event, then definitely more. One event is driving much more sales, but usually author events, there are many events and many appearances, and so collectively they might come out to be about the same. But just in terms of, as I say, efficiency and impact, they've been amazing. Well, we'll keep doing them.
Yeah. And when you do those sorts of events, do you push sales through your own website, for example, and maybe offer a discount through, with a certain time limit?
Yeah, there have been discounts. I mean, we're encouraging them to come to us directly, but we have other channels where people can go, whichever their preferred channel is. Discount codes around events has always been a big feature of publishing.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, Mark, that's it for the questions.
Okay, great. So that sort of brings us to the end of today's session. I'd really like to thank all of you for participating today. It's been a great conversation and really appreciate you joining us. We'd also like to thank everybody obviously who's joined online and is listening in, and wish you a pleasant rest of the day wherever you all are.
All right.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Everyone, bye.
Bye-bye.